Welcome to another C Global webinar. We do these about 4 or 5 times a year, and we try to pick topics that would be relevant to those who have an interest in singleness, family, spiritual family, sexuality, personal health and well-being. So we are really glad today to have 2 special guests whom I will introduce in just a minute. C Global is a ministry that focuses on equipping the church with a biblical paradigm of singleness, marriage, and family that seeks to engage everybody, singles, married, singles again, into community and to empower them for kingdom service. So that's what we are about as a ministry. We are a nonprofit charitable organization. So we are grateful for donations and support from our listeners and others that hear about us. We have a website at cglobal.net, which gives more information about who we are, what we do, and how you can support us. We do appreciate support by prayer as well. That's just a huge factor. God is doing some absolutely amazing things, and we are ever excited about the expanding need to have a positive understanding of singleness and family around the world, including with the World Evangelical Alliance and a number of partners that we are now working with. So God's at work, great things are happening. Today, we are very blessed to have Mia Klassen and Margaret Wright share with us on the topic of trauma during COVID with solutions in daily lives. This is particularly relevant during our season of COVID. I think as so many of us are either stressed ourselves or we're aware of those around us who are in heightened stressful situations. So we find this topic to be something that's really relevant to, it's relevant anytime, quite frankly, but it's especially relevant right now. Let me introduce our 2 speakers. Mia Klassen is a registered counselor through Canadian Professional Counseling Association. She has a specialty in adverse childhood experiences, severe abuse, trauma, OCDs, PTSD, DID, and all diagnosed mental illnesses. And she counsels individuals and families and provides group counseling. So I'm sure if that is something you are looking for, by the way, we're happy to put you in touch. Her greatest desire is to encourage, empower, and bring forth healing, hope, and resilience to individuals affected by damaging and potentially altering experiences. She also works as a trauma clinician through Homewood Health and First Nations, providing weekly blogs for marginalized women through a website called hopefortheheart.net. So we welcome Mia. And Margaret Wright is a registered nurse working part-time at the Alberta Children's Hospital and has her degree in nursing from the University of Manitoba with 37 years of working in the profession. Margaret herself was a victim of crime and suffered injustice in the court system. So she brings years of experience and from bibliotherapy, you might have to define that one for us, Margaret, for her own healing. Margaret teaches on brain functioning, the impact of PTSD on brain and body, and how to assist victims of crime. Margaret has a heart for those who are struggling to make sense of their world and a passion to see many find wholeness and healing through brokenness in their lives. She also has a passion to use music. We have been blessed many years with Margaret's music abilities and leadership, but she likes to use music as a bridge to bring others into a place of healing for themselves and others. And so let me just pray for our 2 speakers, and then I will turn it right over to them. So let's just pray for our session together. God, we are just so grateful for your provision and how you work through people and how you give us all different abilities and equippings and spiritual gifts. And Lord, we just pray that your Holy Spirit would speak through Margaret and Mia this morning or this evening, wherever people are, as they share and share from their heart and share with an understanding of your goodness and grace, and that you are the master healer. And so, Father, give us all wisdom as we learn and as we hear from them and as we interact together. We are ever grateful for your provision of technology and your provision of people with different gifts and hearts. And so we commit this time to you now in the name of Jesus. Amen. And excellent. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Margaret and Mia. I think it's Margaret. Is that right?
Thank you so much, Barry, and welcome everyone. I see we have a nice small group, so please feel free to put any questions that you have or any concerns. Feel free to let us know, and we can definitely address things while we're going on. I just want to clarify that I do work as a nurse with Alberta Health Services, but I'm here today in the role of a volunteer assisting Mia as she presents the majority of our presentation today. Biblically, one of the verses that stands out for me as we're getting ready to talk about ourselves and self-care and trauma is the fact that God says in the Bible, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Loving ourselves is something that's very biblical, and self-care is very much part of our solutions that we want to present today within our daily lives. Stress, burnout, compassion fatigue have very much been in the news, especially during this COVID time. It's not just all in your mind, it's actually in your body as well too. It's a physiological reaction, and that is something that we want to address within this presentation. Barry did mention bibliotherapy, and that is simply reading. I do enjoy reading books and articles, and it's from that I found a lot of healing working alongside a counselor when I was going through some of my own trauma therapy for my own self-care and to find some healing for myself. We will not be discussing what COVID is or the different viewpoints about COVID, but what we want to discuss instead is the fact that there are stressors. We are aware that there is frustration, confusion, loneliness, isolation, and it has been impacting us physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And so we would like to just discuss today how to cope, how to heal, how to support each other, accept each other, understand each other, even with differing viewpoints, and how to build resiliency in our daily lives so we can be the body of Christ and look after each other. The book that both Mia and I have been given has been a book on resilience, balance, and meaning that comes from Patricia Fisher, who has 30 years of experience in trauma training. We have provided the website there from Tend Academy, and they have many excellent courses that people can take for trauma care if you're even wanting to do it in your own ministry and in places of work or at home in society. The word tend means to care for, to look after oneself, to pay attention to what's going on with yourself. And without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Mia now.
So welcome to this group, ladies and gentlemen. Did you know that in pre-COVID times, pre-COVID or addresses depression, anxiety, stress in the workplace, which is below the statistics that you come from. These statistics are from before this time. 30% of Canadians know a coworker who has been diagnosed by a clinical depression. 40% of workers reported their job as very stressful. 58% of workers say their job stress is the biggest source of stress in their lives. 12% of Canadian or US workforce is absent every day. Psychological problems are the main cause of 80% of disability claims. And mental illness cost $50 billion to Canadian companies in 2006. So this was pre-COVID times. Imagine what it's like right now. Go ahead, Margaret. So stress, some questions to consider. So this is a picture that I fell in love with. I'm a little stressed right now. Just turn around and leave quietly so and no one gets hurt. And that presents many of us at some point in our lives. So regarding that, what I'm wondering about is what is the stress and why is it important to understand it? Who do you think is stressed? What's the importance of wellness? And how big is the problem of stress? It's a massive one, isn't it? What is the cost, especially now during COVID? What does a person look like when she or he is well? And how old, fit, prepared is the well person to do what's needed? So these are questions that are well worth considering, and you can even answer some answers in the chat box if you like. Thanks, Margaret. Thanks, Margaret. We'll go to the next one. Yeah. These pictures really talk to me. So because of COVID-19 and our brains, so just imagine the stress this pandemic has added to you, your family, your environment, financially, emotionally, relationally, physically. People are now stuck with their devices and they don't talk to each other very often. And they've been asked to be 6 feet apart at all times. It's a lonely time for many. Thank you.
Some questions to consider as we start to get into the presentation. Where you work, what changes have you noticed? What happens when the stress becomes intense, both in the workplace and the population you serve? Are you working from home? What are the stresses in the home life? What is happening with children in the home? What's happening with everybody on their devices at the same time, trying to work and do school at the same time? How do we support each other during this difficult time, especially with differing viewpoints? How can we build a bridge of understanding and connection that's strong enough and stronger than pre-COVID to be able to support each other as we come out the other end with COVID?
Mm-hmm.
Mia.
So living with COVID. Adults following shifting provincial or governmental requirements, experiencing job loss, working from home. That was me for 2 years. Masking rules, social distancing, inability to worship, go out and meet with family and friends, etc. It's been such a huge life-altering time for all of us. And what breaks my heart as a counselor are the kids, because they are so isolated, they're lonely, they're confused. So some weeks they can go to school, some weeks they have to stay home. They may or may not have to wear masks. And what about when they are doing their breaks? It's all confusing questions for everybody. And the worst part is the media. It's catastrophizing the worst of the worst. It's making things sound horrible and keeps us scared. Stress is very rampant. So reality, hope needs to be found within. As Christians, our hope is in God. He loves us and knows our needs. Can we trust him even though everything around is changeable? Yeah. What is your hope in this environment? Please write a comment in the chat box regarding this. Now, I want to hand this over to Margaret because I'm sure she has got some things to say about this one too.
Yeah, we've all had very, very different experiences. I work at the Children's Hospital where I'm having to mask and goggle all the time. But going back 15 years ago, I actually was diagnosed with a blood cancer and was told at that point that my immunity was going to be very low. So for the last 15 years, if people are sick, I've had to avoid certain places. I've had to social distance. I've had to be very careful. And there was a period of time when I was very fearful at the very beginning. But what I've discovered over the years is God has taken care of me. I've learned to trust him. I've learned that I can go back and work as a nurse. I can be part of large gatherings. And that in the midst of everything, even though I have a condition that I never chose, God is still my strength and my weakness. I think that's the best way of putting it. And realizing that that strong place of what Nia just wrote at the bottom, I do know God is looking after me in the midst of everything, no matter how difficult the situations can get. And I'm very grateful to God for looking after my health, even in the midst of being a health practitioner in a hospital. So.
Absolutely. Thanks, Linda, for your comment.
Yeah.
So this was a bridge that I chose just a little while ago because it's a bridge over troubled borders. So when you think about it, what way can you personally bring a bridge of connection in your workplace? Extending family and friends. We need to find a way to connect to one another after being 6 feet apart for 2.5 years. There is time for us to be able to connect in an emotional level, and that's vital for us to do so. Because God created us to be living together and not isolated and apart. So let's go to complex stress model and resiliency. Complex stress model has got a couple of things. It's got systemic stress and traumatic stress. The systemic stress is about your workplace itself, and even your church, family, and your surroundings. Systemic stress occurs on your job, your place, your conditions, surroundings, and your management might be dysfunctional. You might have difficulty family working from home, or kids studying at home. Also, you may find out that you're COVID positive. Burnout or harassment may occur. Drama within isolation happens very often and will occur. This is a little bit different than traumatic stress. Traumatic stress is about being assaulted, harassed, threatened, or intimidated. Physical injury or PTSD are a possibility. And I have a lot of clients with both right now, especially during COVID. And then there's long-term indirect trauma. COVID has brought trauma to many during isolation. Catastrophizing in the public or media, persecution complex, leading to delusions and paranoia. Also, vicarious trauma are a reality for many. Vicarious trauma means you watch someone else having a trauma, having something happen to somebody else, but you become traumatized by observing that trauma. Thanks, Margaret. So what kind of trauma are you exposed to? We all respond to trauma to stress in a very different ways. We are all exposed, we all experience, and we all respond or react or respond. Yeah, this picture spoke to me. My son is a paramedic, so he does take care of horrendous things. He's a paramedic supervisor. He gets the worst of the worst. Just imagine what it's like for those two firefighters or paramedics. I'm not even sure what they are completing their duties. But imagine the stress within that situation. My son, actually, they have a lot of groups, and they have a mandatory counseling after seeing violence, and which he sees daily. So he is very well supported during that time. And I hope most of the people are, but that is not the reality. The cost of caring. There's an effects of exposure to complex stress and resiliency. Work has unique challenges now. And it occurs especially because of COVID. Vulnerable workers are seen as weak. When you think about it, vulnerable workers might be the ones who are hesitant to take in that COVID shot. And that is not fair to anyone. I have a client who has got cancer, and she doesn't want to take that shot because it will hurt her. So she's seen as a vulnerable worker. But perhaps there are other issues added to that as well. How we feel and how we portray ourselves is different. Our belief systems might be challenged. Simply, general population do not understand. There are so many differing views over how to respond to different situations in our lives. And also, work is very undervalued. Thanks, Margaret.
So just a few definitions as we get ready to go into more of the nuts and bolts of our presentation. Compassion fatigue. This is the indifference to what is happening to people around you when you are in a work situation. It comes to a place where you are so physically and mentally exhausted and depleted that your ability to cope with your environment comes down to zero, to the point that you no longer care what's happening to people. In other words, I could be a nurse and not caring about my patients, but just going through the motions. The cost of caring for others in emotional pain, it refers to profound emotional, physical erosion that takes place when helpers cannot refuel and regenerate. And part of what we want to talk about today is how do we refuel and regenerate so we do not come to the place of compassion fatigue, no longer caring about the people that we are looking after. Burnout is very different. It's a term that describes physical and emotional exhaustion workers experience when they have low job satisfaction. They feel powerless and overwhelmed and long to make a difference, and they want to see people get better. The compassion is still there. There's not the damage or the loss of compassion, but it's more of the, I care so much for people and I can't do what I want to do, that a person becomes physically and emotionally burned out. Over to you, Mia.
Thanks, Margaret. Burnout. Often people diagnosed with burnout are unable to return to the workplace successfully. That has occurred especially because of COVID. Especially, maybe 60% of my counseling clients are working from AHA, and the other 40% are teachers. So it's both those occupations are facing tremendous stress and burnout right now. And burnout brings in emotional exhaustion, cynicism, and that's what we discuss a lot. Sense of in efficacy, and also concern that you are unable to perform and care. Recognizing risk factors in your job or ministry, on stress and compassion fatigue. When have the following factors affected your work? Can you think about this really carefully? And you can even answer if you like on the chat box, or think about this just on a personal level. So when have they affected your work? And that's regarding your gender, ethnicity, your physical health and fitness, job demands, social support, attitudes, work minister life conflicts, work minister conditions, your schedule, and last but certainly not the least is COVID. COVID has altered our work environments tremendously and made us hermits in so many different ways. So traumatic stress. So let's talk about risk of traumatic stress, including ACEs and PTSD. ACEs is adverse childhood experiences, and PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. You can see these in front of you are 10 signs of how childhood experiences can influence neurodevelopment. And these are very significant because this is what I see all the time. Those 10 signs are, if you look at this, if you have ever been affected by anything, and you can even, count that as one finger. And you can see that if you have any of these 10 signs, like childhood abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, childhood neglect, physical, emotional neglect, household dysfunction, domestic violence, doesn't have to be towards you, but something that you can see, something that you saw, parental discord, separation or divorce, or criminal behavior in the home. When you calculate how many you have, the very significant part of that, if you have 4 more of these markers, your risk of developing social, cognitive, emotional impairments. And this is very sinister. Adopting health risk behaviors, developing diseases, disabilities, or having social problems becomes multifold. Risk of mortality, early death by 20 years is present. So now comes the big key, a big question. What can we do as a society about this? Because there is something we can do. So I'll just show you first what it looks like. This is kind of a more sinister picture as well, but this is the reality. From conception, from adverse childhood experiences, when your kids are hurt, they end up having a disrupted neurodevelopment that leads into social, emotional, and cognitive impairment, which leads into adoption of health risk behaviors. When you think about this, a child who is hurt at age 4, for example, there is a part of the brain that ceases growing during that stage. So that's when that growth starts, they will have social and emotional cognitive impairment. And as they grow, they will adopt health risk behaviors because that brain has not grown into proper alignment as it should be. And that leads to disease, disability, and social problems, which leads into early death. Thanks, Margaret. now we can actually fight back. This was a wonderful couple of screens that you will see that I will share as to where they are coming from right away. There are 7 childhood experiences that are linked to strengthening mental health as adults. These are factors that make children survive their past abuse and thrive despite their painful past. And these are very important. Thanks, Margaret. This is very simple, but this is a profoundly important part that we can do to children. Feel free to take a picture of this as well, if you like. So there are identified positive childhood experiences that shaped mental health in adults. Number 1 is ability to talk with family about feelings. So invite kids to talk about their feelings. Number 2 is felt experience that family is supported in difficult times. Kids need to feel that family is listening to them. Number 3 is enjoyment in participation in community traditions. So going out to any community environmental events that you have would be lovely for the kids to see as well. And allow them to feel they belong to their school. And they're supported by their friends. And this is important, having at least 2 non-parent adults who genuinely care. Like, students can feel that their teachers is scared. That's one of them. And that's a really important part of the kids' welfare as well. And last, number 7, feeling safe and protected by an adult at home. So safe and protected are crucial parts of this positive adult experiences. Safe and protected. Allow kids to feel they can develop their own confidence.
Yes.
Thanks, Margaret.
And when you look at the positive childhood experiences, we can see many keys as to how we can support each other as adults as well too. Do we have a place where we can talk about our feelings? Do we feel supported? Do we have enjoyment being with people around us? Do we feel that we have people we can talk to? Do we feel safe and protected? It's something we can translate into the adult world as well too. So how does traumatic stress happen? It happens through an exposure to a trauma. It usually occurs when somebody is witness to experiences or actually hears about something that is shocking, creating high stress, and it's overwhelming. It's something that has occurred in real time, such as this pandemic, creating chaos and distress. Patricia Fisher, in her book, discusses the fact that traumatic events can be threats, accidents, assaults, combat, emergencies, natural disasters, diagnosis with serious illness. They've even discovered that women with very long labor can end up having trauma and PTSD afterwards. Mm-hmm. Sexual abuse, sudden death or loss of a loved one, and other physically and highly emotionally threatening experiences. How does traumatic workplace stress happen? First of all, there's the acute, the initial response to trauma. And as I mentioned at the beginning of our talk, there is a physiological event that happens to our bodies. When we go into fight flight, our body is trying to get ready to protect itself. What happens is the sympathetic nervous system of our body kicks in. And as you can tell, I love this diagram because it shows very simply what's happening throughout the whole body. Your lungs are affected, your breathing rate increases, your heart is affected, your heart rate increases, your blood vessels are affected, your arteries, the pressure in your arteries increase, your blood pressure goes up. Your pancreas starts to pour out blood sugar levels so you can have something to be able to react with. Your muscles get increased blood flow, and you've heard the thing of somebody very tiny lifting up a car to rescue a baby or a child. This comes from this fight-flight reaction. What I find very interesting is while the body is putting blood towards the muscles, it relaxes in other parts of the body. And if you've ever wondered when you're under high stress or there's a trauma happening, why all of a sudden you don't feel hungry, your intestinal muscles relax, you can't digest, your body has removed the blood into other parts of the body to be able to fight and do what it needs to do. At the same time, for those that are medical, our hormones kick in at the same time. The body is flooded during fight flight with adrenaline, noradrenaline, and corticosteroids. And if you notice on the bottom of the right-hand column, what happens is your immune system is suppressed. This is only supposed to happen for a very, very short period of time. And that is what the acute phase is talking about. After the stress is over, your breathing is supposed to relax. Your heart is supposed to relax. The muscles have the blood flow taken from them. Your body is able to start to digest food again. Think about sitting in a hot tub, sitting on a beach, and feeling your whole physiological body relax. That is what we're supposed to do after a stress. What happens, though, is quite often there's a secondary response. And in the secondary response, a person's body has stayed with all of these symptoms going nonstop without a break, which means the hormones haven't stopped flooding your body. This is not a normal reaction. We are supposed to be balanced, full of energy, excellent health, active, vibrant. What happens when you're in constant fight flight? You end up being sometimes over-aroused, under-aroused, unstable. You can see there's many, many different symptoms there that come from your body being in fight flight all the time. And in the end, your immune system is suppressed, your nervous system becomes exhausted. Think about what it's like when you go for a run or a fast swim or something where you're getting your heart rate up and your body becomes tired. Physiologically, when you have stress going at you nonstop and you continue to have all of the symptoms that we've showed right here, your body cannot keep this up. And they say that within the first 6 months, if you are able to recognize that something is happening, you will not develop PTSD. Many people say we all have trauma, we all have stress. Why do some people seem healthy and others seem to be constantly getting sick, landing up in hospital, landing up in emergency? Because your body is so exhausted fighting the stress, it can no longer fight anything else that comes along its way. PTSD. This is where you have the occurrence of nightmares, flashbacks, and intrusive thoughts. Finally, it becomes chronic, where you no longer feel normal. A person becomes isolated, they feel damaged, they withdraw. Nightmares can occur, triggers, flashbacks, and distress now become part of your regular life because your body simply has stayed in the sympathetic system and has no longer gone to that place of rest and relaxation that I like to call the beach. Mm-hmm. PTSD is a very, very big subject. I have a whole presentation of a couple of hours. Put it very simply, there's 4 major symptoms. Flashbacks, nightmares, intrusion, avoidance of reminders of traumatic experience. For myself, I went through a very traumatic assault back when I was a teenager. Any time that I tried to walk by myself before I dealt with the situation in my life, I could not. I'm just going to admit somebody here. I could not go and walk by myself. And it took years and years until I finally dealt with the underlying PTSD in my life, where I was finally able to start walking by myself. And that's an idea of an avoidance. And some people, the avoidance is so bad, they will not leave their house. They will not leave their bedroom because of the stress that they feel. There's high arousal. A person can get triggered. And what happens when a person is triggered is they actually physiologically feel the same physical, mental, emotional stresses on their body that they did in the actual assault or trauma when it first happened, which is why you can see a person who suddenly becomes triggered, become very, very upset, or they have to run away and they're trying to protect themselves because they think they're right in the middle of the initial trauma again. And as we talked before, the negative mood, the withdrawal, the estrangement from others, not doing things that they love to do anymore. And one of the big Symptoms of PTSD is a person only being able to be serious. The ability to laugh is often gone completely. Not being able to see the funny side of life is just not there anymore. Now, this slide is very, very interesting. You won't be able to see all of it, but I'll try and move this around a little bit so you can see it in the screen. Eventually, we have what is called chronic post-traumatic stress disorder. That is the freezing and the fight-flight, freezing where your body is staying at the high alert all the time. One of the psychiatrists who is very well known for PTSD work over Winnipeg talks about freezing in the fight and flight to such a degree that they see it in mental health as one of the contributing factors to all mental health illnesses and many physical illnesses as well too. So when you see somebody who's in chronic PTSD, you may see them fighting. They might be angry, show aggression, be controlling and bullying. They can't hear another person's point of view. They feel entitled. They demand perfection of others. Other people will be in constant flight. They will be panicked. There will be anxiety, worrying. You'll see them rushing around. They can't sit still. They'll micromanage. They'll be overachievers. Others will freeze in the fight flight, and their main symptoms you will see will be spacing out, feeling that things are very unreal, isolating oneself, dissociation, brain fog. You've heard that term where you just can't think straight. The reason why is your brain is in trauma and your frontal lobe actually can't think and process things the way it's supposed to. An inability to decide, to feel. And finally, there's fawn. This is a brand new one that they've found. This is where a person's at the point that they're so traumatized that they people please. They basically lie down and let people walk over them. They flatter others. They do everything in their power to keep people happy all the time. They will end up being exploited at many times. They're what we call a yes man or a yes woman. So as you can see, post-traumatic impacts the spirit, soul, mind, emotions, memories, and body. It's so important for us to realize it's just not all in our heads. We can't just say to somebody, snap your fingers and snap out of it, because your whole body, mind, and emotions are part of everything that is going on, and it's not as easy as snapping out of it. And on to you, Mia.
Thanks, Margaret. And what Margaret talked about, effects of that, and they're massive for us. And they also, when you think about the effects of chronic stress, they have physical health effects. And it's illness and disease, cardiovascular things, GI problems, immune and endocrine systems, pain, fat, and sugar metabolism. So with people who are physically stressed, usually what happens, they gain a lot of weight, or they don't eat and they lose weight. So it usually is one or the other extreme, and they become weaker. They start to eat chronic, they might have a chronic sugar addiction. So that becomes part of their stress relief. They have mental health issues. They might have mood disorders of different kinds, and their self-esteem is crushed. Also, the internal and relationship effects are affected. They may become reactive to family, friends, workplace, and the attitudes will be very negative, or they might go all over the place. And now, last but not the least, is COVID and its massive impact. Teachers and nurses are so very stressed right now. That's what I have for most of my clients. I have a full client base right now, and it's they have tremendous amount of stress within their workplace currently. And usually it works so in such a way that when people are stressed at work, that stress comes to their homes as well. So they will have discord. Often they have discord at home as well. So let's talk about resiliency. Definitions and examples of resilience. It's really the capacity to recover quickly from stress and the challenges it brings. It's that internal strength within us, and we can bring forth within us. So if you have good coping skills, you demonstrate resiliency. And if you're able to communicate openly, you demonstrate resiliency. And it also provides abundant coping strategies in life, soul care, and the choice to take care of yourself. Now, there's a question for you. So what has provided resiliency for you in this time of COVID? Can you answer that question in the chat box, please? So what has provided resiliency for you in this time of COVID? What's the question? Walking in nature for somebody. Getting outside anywhere. Sunlight is incredibly important. Thank you for making that very important comment. Staying as connected as possible to family, friends, God, and nature. Yes, yes, absolutely.
Mine is going for a swim.
Absolutely. Mine is running.
Yep.
Yeah. Or even rowing. I have a row at home. Yeah. Working out in general. Very nice. That's exactly right. Yes. Yeah.
Another one of mine is reading a good book.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Mine is going for hikes. Oh, they're a huge highlight for me. So yeah. Yeah. Now comes to resiliency and its cost. There could be things that affect your ability to manage. And those could be different feelings, knowledge, and beliefs about COVID in your workplace. COVID has brought forward so many issues for so many people. And I deal with those on a daily basis in my counseling. And also what can cause you challenges is the intensity of your workload, your own responsibility and its outcomes, the nature of your work. And especially when we have to be distanced from one another, that has affected people severely. And there's also potential for violence. Simply hurting people hurt people. And I've heard that over and over again in workplace, in people who are hurt. And there's a greater level of a hostility in people who are working. Bitterness, shame, and blame may occur or will occur. And we will all depend on the symptoms and severity of trauma. Symptom and severity of the reaction that you have. Yeah. The really big part of that is hurting people hurt people. Resilience and its cost. There are things that strengthen you as well. And these are really important ones. And number one is access to skilled, trustworthy, and dependable supervision. Supportive environments that enable mutual respect and understanding. Shared encouragement. And this one is a really big one. I speak about this every single day in my counseling. Modeling your personal resiliency within your workplace. So showing your strength by being strong in the workplace will make a big difference for everyone. And also training. What can help resiliency? The more rewarding the work, the more resilience is gained. Personal history of abuse can equip with compassion and understanding or bring forth further vulnerability. So when you think about your past, we all make a choice, and I speak that a lot in counseling. We all make a choice. We can either choose to be reactive, or we can respond and model in a different manner, model strength that we have gained to support the environment around us. Personal compassion support through family and friends enables resilience to be maintained. There's nothing like having a pat on the back and saying you telling somebody, oh, good job, excellent, you're doing great. So that builds oneself really well. And also having a partner with PTSD increases vicarious trauma. So you watching someone who is hurting will allow you to be, quite often will get you feeling hurt as well. Personal styles and current life stressors can be a blessing or a cure. So that is something that we all choose as to how we're going to respond to those stresses that we have in our lives. Where does resiliency come from? And how do we return to normal? This one is a big one. So how can it protect against effects of stress? And that's resiliency. So these ones are questions I'm going to ask you to answer in your chat box if you can. So how does resilience function in your personal life? What's the best way for you to relieve the stress of others? So model competence, model resiliency of others around you in your workplace. And this one is a big one. How does faith strengthen your resiliency? Faith helps me center on what is most important. Thank you. Faith gives long-term perspective on current problems. Thank you very much. Very good. Sure does. It's something we can lean on, eh? Yeah. I let go of things that I have no control over. Exactly. Faith and hope for a better day. That's choosing to look at the positive part of life. That's wonderful. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Laughter can be really helpful. Yes, absolutely. As you notice, I don't identify who is writing this, so it's a little bit easier for everybody. Thanks, Margaret. Where do you see your relative strengths and challenges? So this is something that you can start to really look within. And I want you to think about this after we are done this session. Where do you see your strengths and challenges? And how do you choose to respond to them? I think that would be even a bigger question as to how you can choose to respond to them as well. Thanks, Margaret.
So after the traumatic experience, the strongest predictor of post-traumatic are factors after the trauma has occurred. Is social support in place? Are there secure attachment bonds with partners, coworkers, friends? This can actually help prevent long-term injury. Background stress, instability can increase PTSD. Therapy, and this is at the point where we say, there are times when therapy and having somebody work with you through the things that are happening, somebody like Mia or people that work like Mia in their field can help you work through things if you've had a trauma that has led to post-traumatic or other disorders. Mm-hmm. Preventative methods. So what can we do practically? How can we prevent things? How can we deal with factors of our risk factors in our lives and build resiliency before trauma even happens? And I'm sure everybody saw the sheet that we sent out, and it's on self-care. Most of the time when people hear self-care, they think sleep, eat, exercise. And all three of those are very, very important. With this sheet, though, there's things under psychological self-care, emotional self-care, spiritual self-care, and workplace and professional self-care. When this is over, take time to go through this and maybe find one or two things in each category that you can add into your daily life as a prevention should trauma occur within your life. Secondary prevention is the trauma has occurred. You are stressed, something has happened. This is where it is so important to find a life partner, a friend, a trusted colleague, somebody who you can spend time with. This was the number one thing that was my takeaway from when I did the trauma training under Patricia Fisher, is the walk, talk, and flush. Because fight and flight becomes a whole physiological effect on your body, you cannot be helped just by talking something over or just by going for a walk. Walking and talking at the same time about the trauma, the things that are bothering you, actually helps the body physiologically work through what is going on while you emotionally talk about it. And to do that until it lifts off of you, which is what we call flush. So if you don't remember anything else that we have said today, if you remember that when you're triggered or you're feeling stressed or traumatized, find somebody to go for a walk with. Some people cycle and talk. Some people are on their treadmill and they are talking to a friend on the phone while they're moving, but it's the movement while you're talking that is the key. When you do that, though, it's very, very important. And this slide comes from Patricia Fisher again. Be aware of yourself. What is going on inside of yourself? Ask permission. Let people know that there's something that's bothering you and say, is it okay if I share with you? We do not want to pass on to somebody else vicarious trauma by traumatizing them with our stories. Limit your disclosure. I can say to you, I was assaulted back when I was a teenager, but I will not give you all the details. So to think about when you're talking with somebody, how to not traumatize them at the same time. And then the last one is tertiary prevention. You've done all the preventative things. You've walked, you've talked, you've done all the things you can to deal with it right at the moment in time. But 6 months later, you're realizing that it's still there. That is the point where you either need to go for counseling, go for prayer with somebody, be with your partner, let them know that you're really struggling, and find the next steps forward. The end, what do we want to do? It's not a selfish thing to look after yourself. Just like when you're on an airplane and the oxygen runs out, they tell you to put the oxygen mask on you first. Take care of ourselves first so we can take care of other people. And with this slide, how do we make a personal difference in our workplace, home, church, and community? And again, with the handout that we gave you, what are the things that we can do individually in our day-to-day lives that make us resilient, that make us strong, so that we can be the hands and feet of Jesus in the community that we're in? And Mia?
This one, it was my favorite, and I read it so many times over. So it's about compassion. Compassion asks us to go where it hurts, to enter into the place of pain, to share in brokenness, fear, confusion, and anguish. Compassion challenges us to cry out with those in misery, to mourn with those who are lonely, to weep with those in tears. Compassion requires us to be weak with the weak, vulnerable with the vulnerable, and powerless with the powerless. Compassion means full immersion in the condition of being human. That is a beautiful statement. Oh, by Henry Nouwen for 2018. So that is asking us to further our understanding, acceptance, and care for others who are in the same boat with COVID, who face the same uncertainty as we do.
So we're going
others as we can. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Margaret.
So I'm going to stop sharing the screen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if there are any questions that you have, feel free to ask us.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Thank you, Margaret and Mia. I'm just going to jump in. And yes, please, if you have a question, what we will do is we are still recording. So if you don't mind having your question recorded, we'll let those questions go first. And then if you would prefer your question not be recorded, then just wait and we'll turn that off here after a couple questions. So does anybody have an immediate question, or should I? I'm certainly happy to lead out with a couple questions. And one question is, well, there's so much there, and so I so appreciate what both of you have shared. And I don't know, like most people, as we hear this, we try to really, man, there's so many things I want to write down and grab. So I am grateful for having so much in so condensed fashion and so short of a time. But one of the questions I had is, in this time of COVID, we have the mantra from the very beginning was social distancing.
Yes.
Yes.
And when I hear that Nouwen quote, and generally, so much, it's so important to be present for others. And yet what we have been told again is to distance, is to stay away. You distance best by not talking to people, because, talking spreads the virus and whatever. And so I guess one of the questions is, what would you say to us in terms of how do we rejuvenate that sense of being present that Nouwen, has said, amidst this period of COVID? Do you have any suggestions, or are we going to see repercussions on the stress factors afterwards because people have actually disengaged their connection, sort of connection response and connection mechanisms? So any suggestions for us? Or is there anything that you've seen in this COVID time related to that social distancing?
Wow. Reconnection to others is vital. And yes, you're so right. People have adopted their devices, and they've learned to speak to others through texting instead of being, and they have avoided human contact because that's what is being suggested to us. It is so important for us to reconnect, whether that's even to any device like this. And your first steps could be just going out for a walk. Walking is safer than having face-to-face contact in the indoor environment. Yeah, and this most important part is being able to choose to model your own comfort. So each person individually, when we are modeling comfort, we can attract others to come and talk to us, and that's vital.
Yes, and that comfort can be expressed a lot of different ways, can it not? So
Including
reaching out,
eye contact,
a phone call, eye contact, just a note of encouragement through a text to somebody. I'm just amazed sometimes how little encouragements is a reach out. One other question that comes to mind, and this is something that I've been thinking a lot about for those that are single, and this is the issue of physical touch. Yes. Because one of the things that has really been taboo is physical touch. And yet, what is your thoughts on the need for physical touch for human well-being? And, how vital is that?
Yeah.
For everybody.
For everybody, yeah. I was thinking, I've seen suicidal clients because they are so lonely. They don't have anyone to touch.
Yeah.
And I've had so many clients who burst out crying when they come in. I have not been able to touch anybody for months.
Yeah.
Imagine what that does emotionally.
Yeah.
How devastating that is.
And the need for, and of course, I'm talking about appropriate touch, but the need for appropriate touch in our lives is real. And we do need, and just that, arm around the shoulder sometimes, the handshake, the elbow, bumps, whatever it is, but those little things I think can be so significant.
They are life providing for a lot of people who are lonely.
Yeah.
Life-giving. Yeah.
Does anybody else have a question they would like to raise? You can either go ahead.
I have a question. I don't know if I'm on mute.
No, we can
hear
you.
We can hear you.
You can hear me.
Is this Sandra?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sandra.
Okay. Well, I had a question, and then just leading up to the question, just a tiny bit of context. Like, I moved into an apartment building 4 months ago, and my mental health has just been steadily increasing every month because I've made friends in the building, and there's a bit of a community, and there's a routine, and there's like a group of us that see each other all the time just by our routines. We bump into each other all the time, and then sometimes we deliberately see each other, and people give each other hugs and say I love you and love ya, and when you talked about physical touch, I hadn't even realized that I've been getting lots of hugs. And in our building, we kind of, it's not the whole building. It's actually a small group of us, really, that sort of have this more regular interaction. But for us, it's like the building, this is our home. This is our family. Like, it's like when they say, keep it in your house sort of thing. This is our house. So it's like we determine ourselves, sort of our culture and our comfort levels and how we want to handle that. And people help each other. Like, if people get sick, it's like people go and help each other and go in and out of each other's units. Like, there's a lot of reciprocity. Like, I'll lend you this, I'll lend you that. Here, take some of this food. Here, take some of mine. And one of my questions, try to phrase the question, but one of my with someone who has become a very good friend in the building, like, we have lots in common, and definitely have some areas of our psychology or personality where there's been some really, just heart-to-heart conversation and the feeling of, being ourselves and a lot of closeness. But this person also, when you described all the symptoms of PTSD, and a lot of them I had never heard before, like maybe controllingness or anger or a lot of reactivity or withdrawal, things like that. These things are intermixed in our friendship because she does have a very long and high history of childhood trauma, and that she's definitely affected by today. And it really puts a lot of challenges into our friendships sometimes because there's a lot of triggers and reactivity and, sort of drama that comes into it too. And it can be emotionally exhausting for me, and it can make things a little bit unpredictable because maybe everything will be calm and close one day, and the next day it's like totally different. Moodiness, withdrawal, triggers, emotionality, and I've sort of anyway. It's
Do you have a question for us?
Yes, I do. Here it is. Here's the question. The question is, when you're interacting with someone who's suffering from all these symptoms, but you're also trying to keep a good balance with your own self-care and mental health, do you have any tips for that?
Great question.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yes, I do. Simply choose to model your own calmness, your own resilience, and your own positivity. So have create a focused effort in not being able to be pulled down by your friend's reactivity.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
so model what I would like to see.
Exactly.
Rather than
model
react
what you'd like to see, and anything else, we do not go into that level. Like very consciously avoid going into that level of frustration with the person who is frustrated.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So when I try to have a goal of, I don't always achieve it, but when I try to have a goal of remaining objective and sort of seeing things from a bigger picture and not get too personally involved in it and enmeshed and reactive because I'm frustrated that, having to be part of that interaction, that's a good goal then. Try to stay a bit objective.
And furthermore, this huge one, have you read the book Boundaries?
Yes.
You will need, excellent. You need to have
Townsend.
very, very, very well developed boundaries with people who are hurt.
Yeah.
Because if you allow your boundaries to be ignored, it's going to be very difficult to remain at a level where you're at.
And there's also a book, but sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yes, I was just agreeing, and I should reread the book.
Yeah, and there's another book now called Beyond Boundaries that actually discusses in detail what you're talking about. And I'd highly recommend the book, The Beyond Boundaries.
Yes, I have both those books. I think every single page is highlighted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's fantastic. It's a to-do book.
Yeah, so I think you'd find the Beyond Boundaries book really helpful.
Is that also Cloud and Townsend, or is that somebody else?
Yeah, it's Cloud and Townsend.
Yeah, fantastic book.
Now, Margaret and Mia, may I just jump in here too? I saw on one slide this idea of vicarious PTSD. And I thought that was interesting. And it was definitely the idea that, if you live with somebody or you have a partner or they're close in your family, that it can affect you.
Yes.
what tips, suggestions would you have there to have appropriate supportive response without crossing over? Is it, again, is that strictly a boundary issue, or is there anything you would add to that?
It certainly is a boundary issue. And you know, I talk to a lot of teachers, and I have a lot of them who have vicarious trauma from their students.
Yeah.
And it's quite something to see that. And it's exactly the same answer that I gave now, modeling your own resiliency and going forward with very clear boundaries. That will be like number one, that will be the focus of anything.
Yeah. And I know Mia, she has a whole presentation on boundaries as well too, where we really go into that in depth.
Yeah, I teach boundaries too.
Let me ask one other thing from a pastoral perspective. And when, because you mentioned the idea that sometimes somebody needs more help. What would be the most clear indication that this is somebody that needs a Mia, this is somebody that needs more help? How do we know when we're with somebody who has crossed that threshold? Are there certain telltale triggers, signs, indicators that you would say to us, if somebody exhibits these things, these factors, you really should recommend them to get professional counseling help?
Very good. I was going to say, Margaret, you can also.
Nope, Mia.
Fine. Number one is reactivity. Reactivity. When I see it, I start to wonder right away. Reactivity, negativity, bitterness, isolation, withdrawal. I can talk for an hour straight, but you know, it's that aggression that's above the level that they can handle, and one can see it. You can see it visually, because how they are reacting is you can see that they're reacting about their threshold.
Right. And there can be the other extreme of somebody who is so placid, says yes to everything, refuses to let you in, and is just trying to people please. They've done the fawn. They're completely, they've lain down and they will not let anybody close.
Yeah, so you will see somebody who's lacking eye connection. That's a really big one.
That's a very big one.
Who does not want to talk, pretends they are all okay. And to me, that's always a point of concern when I see that.
Yeah.
Because we are all human. We all make mistakes. I have made so many pathetic ones. You know, it's difficult to go forward without a concern when I hear that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Wow.
Like an example with my friend, like, might be like, let me know if this would be an example of one of the many things you're referring to. Like, it's challenging so that she feels not abandoned and not betrayed, like by the slightest, littlest thing. Like, if I am half an hour late calling her, then it, like, punishing behavior, like withdrawal, punishing, you know, trying to sort of do something hurtful to, like, get back at me. Like, when I was not, it's just innocent, right? I'm just half an hour late. Yeah.
Well, any indication of self-harm is probably
a big one.
One as well.
Yes.
So
and any reaction to so when you think about that level of reaction is very low. So just remain within your boundaries in a very loving manner, regardless of what their level is at. Remain within your boundaries for self-preservation, safety for yourself as well.
Yes, and it, I think we have to acknowledge too, I know from a pastoral perspective, because I've done not clinical counseling, but, you know, spiritual counseling, you know, their problem is not your problem. And so it's important to remember you try to enter in and to help somebody. Now, of course, if they're living with you, sometimes there is an overlap, but if there's somebody, who is outside your particular living situation and context, you can't solve their problems. They have to solve their problems. You have to work with them, but not make their problem or allow their problem to be what keeps you up at night. So I'm going to just stop the recording. Thank you for everybody. Oh, go ahead.
Before you do, somebody
want-
asked if the PowerPoint would be available to us, and
Yes.
my wonderful tech husband will be able to put those on sheets, and I can send
Okay.
them to Barry to send out.
Okay.
The
we
other
can do
thing
that.
is, if you're wanting more information on what I was teaching, it's called The Body Keeps the Score.
Perfect.
And it is by Basil van der Volk. It's called Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma, but the actual title is The Body Keeps the Score. And this is an excellent, excellent book.
Fantastic book.
Yeah.